Hello, my name is Dylan, and I'm a medical student at the University of Wisconsin. I'm working with Wisconsin Voices for Recovery to bring you Saturday Night Chat. This is a monthly chat that creates space for people to share their recovery journey and show people in and seeking recovery that they are not alone and that recovery is possible. Today, I'm pleased to have Jody with me. Jody, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about your desire to help those seeking recovery?
Of course. My name is Jody Bell. I am a person in active recovery, long-term recovery for the past 10 years. And like anybody else, I just want to give back what has been given to me as far as the knowledge and resources.
All right. Well, I know part of that for you shared with me a bit, is that you were doing some training to become a CCAR recovery coach. Can you tell me a bit more about what that is and kind of what that means to you?
Of course. So CCAR, Community for Addiction Recovery, it's actually Connecticut Community for Addiction Recovery. That consisted of a 4-day intensive training that was provided from Wisconsin Voices for Recovery. The training not only provided me with tools and resources, but also 12 other peers or individuals um, to expand our recovery community and network so that we can help those that are in or seeking recovery.
All right. I know. So you've been working on that, and then you said you've been in recovery for 10 years. How long, or is there anything else that you've done during that time to help assist others with their recovery?
Go into support groups in and around the area. That has helped me just being a presence on social media, speaking about my experience. I have friends and acquaintances that message and chat with me regularly, wanting suggestions or advice. Not necessarily with themselves, but someone they know that is in active addiction. So just being a voice to show that recovery is possible, sharing my experiences that I've been through and trying to be a voice to steer those into the actual recovery community.
All right. Well, thank you for all of your work and support for others in that. To get a bit more into your journey, what were some difficulties that you feel like you encountered along the way? And what would you want others to know about kind of the process of entering and going through recovery?
Certainly. So I think the biggest difficulties that I faced probably were within at first. A lot of denial and lack of knowledge,
Mm,
even from a young age, with the experiences that I went through. I didn't really know any different. I wasn't taught any differently, even when the situations did come up. So the mental, emotional, sexual, and physical abuse that I faced in my young and now adult life led to quite a few issues because I never worked through the abuse or any of the actual issues when they arose. So mental health wasn't really a topic discussed in my household or even in my community back then. And if it was, there was always a negative connotation behind it. So traumas that I had been through, they weren't ever discussed in my family. And if they were just brushed under the rug. Um, if they were even acknowledged at all. I know there was some instances where I was accused of lying when I was younger. And it's just like that type of lack of emotional support and guidance definitely helped steer me down a path that I wasn't ready for. Um, Also, drug and alcohol use. That was a norm in my family, even in society around me. So when it came time to looking at myself within, I didn't think that I actually had a problem because everyone else was doing it around me, whether it be family or friends, even significant others at the time. So while it was enjoyable for me at the time, entering recovery was probably the scariest thing for me, whether it was forced or voluntary. And it was probably the hardest decision that I've ever made, um, and ever accomplished at this point. So even now, there's so much stigma for myself and those that have mental illness, having been previously incarcerated, also being in recovery, which there shouldn't be that negative stigma behind it. We're making a change to better our lives. So people in recovery like myself, I like to describe us as warriors for the experiences that we faced and the insights that we have to share to help those that are either in recovery or wanting and seeking recovery.
Well, it sounds like there were a number of things that contributed, and again, congratulations on recovery, and thank you again for coming to share those experiences today. To build a little bit upon kind of what you mentioned with some of the stigma and speaking to others, it sounds like there were a lot of other people around you too who might have been experiencing struggles with substance use disorders or other mental health disorders and things too. So, how did other people react to your experiences or your decisions to seek help when you would tell them
Certainly.
about it?
So when I share personal experiences that I've gone through in my early childhood, and even the different difficulties and traumas that I faced. Like I mentioned previously, the sexual assault, and abuse, not only from family members, but also family friends and significant others, um, being held at gunpoint, the emotional and physical abuse, that all stemmed from low self-esteem and self-worth, which those that I've spoken to often wonder how I'm still alive at this point. But they're grateful that I've entered recovery and that I've shared my experiences, because it helps show them that no matter where you come from, you still can make a difference and you can change for the better. Um, excuse me, I have had to cut off certain individuals and relationships in my life just because they weren't healthy for me, as well as I've had to create boundaries for family and friends, that may not fully understand recovery, or the experiences that I've been through, um, because I've often found there's not necessarily the want to dig deep into those earlier traumas, so to speak, and actually work through the issues. So I've just had to create boundaries for myself to keep myself and my recovery on track, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. So I know one of the things you mentioned in there was setting some of the boundaries and kind of having to work through things with people who might not understand, whether it be friends, family, or someone else, some of the processes of recovery or some of those things. And if in working through that process, what do you wish that the people who aren't as familiar with substance use disorders, recovery, and some of the steps there, what do you wish that they knew about it or wish you could work through with them easier?
Certainly. So, throughout my time, as far as through my journey on recovery, um, I've learned everything. Whether it be learning how to actually love myself and have self-worth for myself. I mentioned creating boundaries. I've had to basically learn every different aspect, not only of myself, but also in the recovery community, because I understand now, as far as with taking the car training and things like that, there's different paths. Everyone has a different path to their recovery. Everyone's recovery looks different, and everyone comes from a different background as far as recovery. Um, so what may work for me doesn't necessarily work for the next person, but getting back into everything that I have learned, um, and what works for me. I mean, self management, that's also smart recovery. Self management and recovery training, different things like that. I've had to grow my base as far as having therapists and counselors. Um, that was in and of itself, with family, a stigma. So knowing that it's okay to reach out and ask for help, going to counseling, going to support groups. There's different recovery meetings, such as like NA, which is Narcotics Anonymous. There's HA, which is Heroin Anonymous. There's different support groups and others out there that are willing to help. Um, and that's one thing that necessarily a lot of people I've talked to don't necessarily understand, is that everyone recovers differently. So what works for me isn't going to necessarily work for the next person, but at least me sharing my different experiences shows them that change is still possible.
Okay. So within that, you mentioned a few different groups. I know you talked about the NA group, the HA group. Are there any other sort of organizations, resources, support groups that you feel like you found along the way that were helpful to you or you've noticed have been helpful to others?
Certainly. Wisconsin Voices of Recovery here is a really good one that I found. I also, as far as my mental health, lean a lot into NAMI and their support groups. NAMI stands for National Alliance on Mental Health. Um, and also just building up my own support system. So not only my immediate family, um, but also friends that I've gained and different peers that I've found in the actual recovery community. Um, and also by going to counseling, I know my therapist was able to provide me with a lot of resources at first, in regards to NAMI, and things like that. So just basically asking for help was my biggest thing in getting and obtaining the resources that I have.
Yeah. Okay. So just to kind of wrap up that aspect, so it sounds like the process of kind of entering recovery, seeking help, you've mentioned was a very difficult and scary process. And then you've mentioned along the way a number of things working with your family, working with mental health providers, and some of those organizations that you just mentioned. Is there anything else that you kind of wish you knew sooner into your recovery journey or any other resources that you wish you had had access to sooner?
Um, I mean, aside from just the knowledge that I've learned, even while I was incarcerated and completing the extensive treatment program that I did over 10 years ago, just the knowledge that I learned starting out my journey, I never knew any of these things ever existed. Behavior and cognitive behavioral therapies, things like that. There's also, I mentioned previously, the different paths of recovery regarding SMART. There's also Celebrate Recovery, um, different, I don't want to say treatment programs because they're still in recovery. But in regards to like the medicated assisted recovery, different things like that, and also the recovery housing community. I never even knew there was such a thing as that. So just starting out on my whole entire recovery journey, learning everything that I have, I wish I would have known sooner, but unfortunately I wasn't able to because I wasn't down that road path, if that makes sense. So just letting people know that you don't have to necessarily get to the point where I did to actually want or be able to change, if that makes sense. And that's one of the biggest things that I want to advocate for and let people know is you don't have to go down the horrible path that I've faced, unfortunately. You don't have to go through all of the experiences that I have faced or gone through to actually change for the better. And the main thing I want to share as far as letting people know about this is just because everyone else may be doing it around you doesn't necessarily mean that you yourself don't have a problem. Because again, that was my biggest thing to start out with was denial.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, so then there's going to be more of an on the spot question, but I know you've mentioned quite a bit now. It sounds like a lot of interplay between what you just mentioned with the denial aspect of things and a lot of mental health and substance use disorders as those things work together. What have been your experiences or thoughts on the care that's provided or the resources that are available that are able to address both of those things and how those work together?
I would say there's not enough resources out there available to everyone. Um, because again, I didn't find out about these resources until I actually entered recovery or even into the prison system. Um, so just making it more known in society, and the biggest change that I'd like to see is acceptance and less judgment for those, whether they're in recovery, whether they have a mental illness, whether they've been previously incarcerated, whatever the case may be. Someone's shortcomings shouldn't necessarily be something for someone else to judge. I think there needs to be more, like I said, acceptance and understanding.
Okay. So it sounds like those are some changes just on a societal level that um, you'd like to see and that in general we need to work on. Are there any other sort of like things that you'd like to see change in society as far as understanding substance use disorders and kind of some of the treatment for that, or any other ways that society could provide assistance that you would like to see emerge in the future?
Certainly. So, I know I'm big on participating in different walk events, fundraisers, that type of thing. One of the big ones here in Dane County, at least for NAMI, is the fall NAMI walk, which I myself will be participating in. I've also extended it as far as to my coworkers to be able to participate in, just because I know mental health is a big issue, um, and not necessarily widespread known about, as well as for recovery and addiction. I participate in the Shatterproof Walk, which is in Chicago. Um, I'd like to really start one up here in the Dane County area in the future. But I participate that in every year, just basically raising awareness for not only drug addiction, alcohol addiction, but also recovery as well. Um, so those are two of the biggest things that I like to do as far as just getting out fundraising, whether it be here in the Dane County area or relatively close to me. I still travel for it as well. But I also spread the awareness that I can as well, on my social media and things like that too. So
Yeah, so I know you've mentioned social media a few times. Do you want to speak at all on kind of the role of social media or how you use it to assist with helping others?
certainly. So I have everything on my social media public, whether it be Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, um, any of those different accounts, my email, my cell phone number, all of that is basically plastered anywhere that I have a profile set up. Um, and I advertise and let people know that yes, I am in recovery. I don't have a issue letting people know that. I did at first just because of the stigma that I faced, but now I look at it as if you're going to judge me for being in recovery, then hopefully I can do something to change your mind about those in recovery, to show that we're not bad people. We can make changes for the better, even if we've made mistakes in the past. We're all human. So I like to keep all avenues as far as for people to reach out to me open, whether they just want to send me a message, whether they want to send me a text message, whether they don't want to send me a message at all, they want to hop in a Zoom meeting. All of those different avenues are open, and I voice that regularly as much as I can on social media, as well as share whatever resources I know of in the Dane County area. Um, there's also the Rally for Recovery that's coming up here in the beginning of September. So all of those different things I like to make sure that I share anywhere I can on my social media accounts.
Right. Well, then with that, I want to open it up a bit more broadly. Is there anything else that you want to share or talk about, or any closing thoughts that you have?
Um, Again, recovery is scary, probably the scariest thing I've ever been through in my life, but it is so worth it. Entering recovery and staying in recovery is probably the biggest accomplishment aside from graduating high school and things like that that I've done in my life, or be married, that kind of thing. So I take a lot of pride in my recovery. And for those that haven't yet entered, yes, it's scary, but the biggest choice and the first choice that you make is the most important, which is choosing recovery and entering it. Because yes, it may flip your entire world upside down from what you know, but the knowledge and the gratitude that you gain from your peers in recovery is so much more rewarding than any drug could ever be. So yes, it's a lot of work to work on yourself and enter into recovery, but it's possible for anybody.
Right. Well, thank you, Jody, for taking the time to come and speak about your experiences. And thank you for all that you're doing for providing support for others through the organizations that you mentioned in your social media and those sorts of things. So, with that, I think I will stop